Hello CG buddies! In today's video I'm gonna show you the process I use when it comes to compositing. When I say compositing, of course, as you may know, is using AfterEffects or Nuke or whatever to attain this kind of result from your raw renders. So I have two disclaimers to say here. The first one is I'm not a comp artist, I'm a 3D generalist. So mostly you do, like, you know guys, modeling, texturing, shading, everything. I'm specialized in environments. But at some point during my career, and even like learning by myself, I ended up doing sometimes some compositing. So if you're a comp artist, don't be offended. But what I'm gonna say, first of all, is I'm using AfterEffects for this example. It's the one that is the most common for freelancers. As an experience, it's the easiest one, especially for me. Nuke, I know, is way better, but I never had the chance to use it for personal work and even like for some clients. It's gonna depend of your ambition and goal. Some studio have comp artists that's gonna deal with that, and some other studio you're gonna do everything from concept art to really having like integration of characters and stuff into your 3D and comp on 2D. So the second disclaimer is when I'm gonna use an old project I did, the Tale from the Crypt short movie I did with my friends. Why this one? Because it's the most complete approach when it comes to compositing. You have like raw renders, FX. On top of that, you have like special effects, and it's the most common process I use when I'm still doing composition. So compositing today, it's not something I'm doing often, not anymore. So that's why I use this old project and I use old version of softwares. When I was doing this one, I was using renting computers, so everything was installed and prepaid, and so no issue at all with that. The first thing you want to do when it comes to compositing is, as you can see here, you're gonna have to check your renders, because every time you do like, let me just go back here. This is what we call the beauty. So beauty, what means is basically your raw renders. So if I go through, you have the animation here, the opening of the fence. So what I'm saying that is because it's very important to press space and let it go through. So you can check all of your frames, if there is missing frames, if your lighting exploded, if there is a weird bush animations, if there is like tones that are moving. Lots of mistakes can happen when you do 3D renders. So always check your renders, because you're gonna have to probably recalculate this area, replace something here, a texture that had jumped, lot of things like that. So always check that. The beauty here. So every time you do a 3D renders, feel free to use passes. I'm gonna explain what it is later on, but it's gonna be the shadow pass, the lighting pass, your light select, the background, IDs, and different passes that are very handy at the end of the project. What I did here, what you want to do as well is add some color to your composition and compositing, because it's gonna help you find, like, for example, this is all of my 2D effect. Here on green, it's my raw renders. This is another raw render, but it's what is brown is because when you click in it, you have another comp into a comp. The red is all of my masking. So sorry guys, it's gonna be in French here, but it's basically the windows. You see here the IDs. I'm using IDs a lot of the time because sometimes I want to correct the color, the wood, the windows. I want to add like in blue. That's why I did here, because the scene in 3D can be very expensive. I didn't render the interior of the house. So the house here that you can see is a little bit empty. There is rooms, but it's empty. What I did on top of that is I added this one, which is, if you look, it's the interior of the next shot. You don't see it here, but if I go here, you can see the transition for the next shot. I'm gonna hide it for now because it's quite heavy. When I was happy with the result of my renders is adding some detail in the windows, especially if you go closer. I was losing some detail through my lighting, so I added a diffuse pass on top of it to make the glass of the windows a little bit more present. And this one is based on the alpha of the blue here. I'm gonna show you again. You can see it's just more present. Also, something important, as you can notice, I rendered everything with the motion blur on already in my renders. So why I did that? It depends on your goal. Doing 3D renders with motion blur on off, it's very expensive. It might take like few hours to render one frame. So it depends on your budget and timeline. Why I did that in this way, it's because I always found that Vray motion blur on DOF is way better than doing it in comp in a 2D app. It was at the time when I did these short movies, it was in 2014, if I recall. So it's quite old, but I was able to render, like each frame here, it's 45 minutes, so it's not that bad with the motion blur on the depth of field. I did it because the result is way better, especially if you look here again. I have so many bushes and everything is moving that what's gonna happen, you have lots of movement like that. And every time I was doing motion blur in 2D, when movement were kind of intersecting to each other, it was exploding. It was doing like some sort of noise of weird motion blur, trying to compensate. So sometimes it's not working, and I didn't want to deal with that, so I rendered everything raw. That's why there is another notion that is important, but I'm gonna explain that at the end again. When you do your 3D beauty or renders, you want your beauty to look as much close to the final comp as possible. Like, I wanted it to look really, really good to begin with. So it's less of an hassle if you want to work with it later on. I was able to render with 3D, motion blur, and depth of field because always remember to optimize your 3D scenes with Vray proxies, make it light. You don't need to have, like for a bush like this, you don't need to have like 4K textures on specific elements. It's ridiculous. I've like on a bush like this, like I'm showing, or these tombs, it's 1K. It's completely enough because there is the motion blur. We are moving. It's never that close. It's never close. So the only element that are 4K here, it's this house. All of the wood is 4K. The tiles here, the roof ceiling, the columns, the stairs, the stones here, because at the end we are becoming super, super close. So now that I have my comp, you can always do some simple fixing. So that's why I did the windows here. The next, I just added some more tint here. I wanted the lights from the windows to pop a little bit more. Then what I did, because it's in the night and I wanted to have some rain, it's to add my first pass splashes. Let me just be here, which is basically a particle flow FX that one of my good friend Tufik did with, I think, yeah, I believe it was particle flow. If I go in, that's this pass here. It's all of the impact that the rain is doing on the ground, of the 3D elements, the fence, everything. It's basically, so how I did that is a little bit complicated. So my friend Tufik rendered like some splash and he gave to me the props, the object. It was a baked object animated. And I just used these meshes that was animated and baked and forest packed it into my ground on some elements. That's why I was able to have so much splashes. everywhere, but it's basically using one animated props popping everywhere. But you have the idea of how I did it. So here you can see some of the splash here. So this is the first pass of FX I added on top. So this one is the same. It's basically in normal, but inside I have the rain splash, a mask because some element, the wall, I wanted to hide this from it, and on top of that, to make it more popping, I added a reflection, which is basically based on an HDRI that is very, very bright. So it really looks like water splashing on the ground. On top of that, what we did, same, Tufik helped a lot in this case, was doing the leaking on the dragons. So leaking water here. As you can see, some dripping that is happening here. Same technique. If I play it, you can see here. So it's a special effect, it's not a texture. It's something that was done with particle flow, I guess, as well. I'm gonna have to confirm that. I added it in addition or screen. So it's on top of my comp. And I just did a mask here to make sure there is no like weird like FX that might popped elsewhere. When you look at the rain, because I wanted to add rains, the rain I did it with particle flow as well. I think it's the most amazing plugin for Max right now. I know some new plugin came in later on, but at the time of these rendering videos, it was not really something. But when you look at the rain, especially at night, you're gonna notice something. When you have a spotlight in the background, you're gonna see a lot of rain. But when you look close to you, you're only gonna catch like few glimpses of rain and drops of gouts, water gouts and stuff like that. So what I did is render two rain passes. One was very, very heavy that I use as a background and was with only like some few droplets of water, because I wanted to create this effect of something really heavy in the background and less heavy in the foreground. For that, it's very simple. I'm going to show you right now. I have background rain and a foreground rain. If I look here, same as usual. So I rendered it. Everything is rendered here with Vray, but no GI, of course. It's a different file, just based on the camera position. And using motion blur as well, because there is too many movement of camera. Like I said before, the droplets, there is too much stuff going on, so I found it way better. And also it's based off my lightning strikes. As you can see here, you have the storm, like here, paf, you have like 1, 2, 3. So it was more easy for me to handle in that way, and this was very easy to render and very quick. So the lights and the camera, that's it. So this one is very heavy. And then I'm gonna show you the other one, which is this one, that is way more subtle. And this one I use it for the foreground. So what I did, I put this one first, here. Depending on the situation on of my lighting, you can see more popping, especially, sorry, when you're gonna be closer to these lights. I'm gonna show you that maybe at the end. And this one is based on the dead depth inverted of my environment. So basically, I inverted this path. So everything that is in the dark shadow black area here, it's gonna be more present and dense. than what is in the foreground. I hope it makes sense, guys. Basically, you have, let me try to find like a lightning strike. It's gonna be more explicit for you guys. Yeah, here you can see the foreground rain, and then the background rain, sorry, and then the foreground. Both comp together. I separated both because as well it was more easy for me to control and to play with the value. You can see here the difference between background and foreground. As you may noticed, more stuff you had, more your comp and After Effects gonna be slower, which is totally normal because I'm working with, like, at the time it was 2K renders or 40p I recall, and everything is in EXR because I wanted to have like depth color, like all of my pass 3D Vray render elements were into the beauty. So that's why it's becoming a bit heavy. It might be better for you, depending on your project, to render everything in JPEGs because you don't need to be that fancy. Here I wanted to be fancy because I'm using the depth, so 32 bits of colors, this kind of stuff, but I don't think it's necessary depending on what you're doing. If it's a short sequence or something like a props or a turntable, I would just use JPEGs and do every render elements into JPEGs. It's going to be easier for you to manage, especially for After Effects, because at the end you have a huge comp. That's why it's important, I always say, to have your beauty as correct as possible, because if you start to add like correction of, oh, my grass here, I have to correct the grass, I have to correct the bush, I have to correct this, but in 2D in comp you're gonna end up with like 100 layers, and After Effects gonna not be happy and you're gonna not be happy because everything's gonna be super slow. So be mindful of that. And also, if you work with somebody in the team, let's pretend you do a pre-comp. You want the pre-comp to be as nice as possible for the next guy that's gonna take over your work, because you don't want him to be like, what the hell is that? Like, which layer, each layer. So name your layer, put colors, everything's gonna be grateful and super happy, and you're gonna be very liked, believe me. Now that we have the first FX pass, what my friend Tufik did, for me, it was adding some FX done with Fume FX, and it's basically the fog that we have here. You can't really see it here, but it's slowly moving, and I wanted something that is very Halloween looking, so tied to the ground, very heavy and dense. Like I said before, it's the same techniques I use with the rain, so it's a separate file. You can have like your beauty with your house, your castle, whatever, your forest, your ground, everything is inside except the FX. You take the camera, your lighting, you create a new file, empty file, and inside I added my FX passes. So the rain, the fog, could be like some animation, your character can be inside the file, as long as the lighting is correct or matching. And I put, as you can see here, like everything that is actually black is what we call very matte element. That means it's into the alpha. So everything that is black is gonna be deleted from the alpha. If I look at my alpha, you see I only have the fog here. So it's something that you can keep in mind if you want to optimize your file, to have your effects separated you don't need to have colors, because the rain, you don't need colors. It's gonna be like white. The fog, you don't need colors. You don't need all of that. And by doing that, you can have your FX passes render way more quickly than having everything all together. Of course, never do that. Never like. You can do that if you have like a Threadripper or I don't know which computer you can have, but still, I found it a bit ridiculous to have your beauty, all of your FX and everything, because like I said, I already rendered everything with my motion blur on dead depth, which is already heavy. I don't suggest everyone to do that, because you can find plugins that do that for you in AfterEffects or Nuke or whatever you're using. The only thing, like I repeat, because it's important for you guys to understand, if you have lots of elements together, like the rain, the bushes moving together, and lots of movement from like Z-axis to X-axis, maybe in 2D your motion blur is gonna break and it's not gonna work, and you're gonna have some frame that's gonna pop or explode. So I allow people to render like motion blur and depth in the beauty, as long as it's not like 4 hours each frame. But FX, never render FX with your 3D renders. It's gonna cost too much time. Like this fog to render took probably like 30 minutes each frame, which is heavy and high because the environment is quite big. There is lots of fog here. So if your render is already 1 hour, you don't want to add another 30 minutes, because even if you have GI and stuff, it's gonna not be 30 minutes, it's gonna be way more. Like this, render this with GI, it's a nonsense for me. Use it separately. You don't need GI, just your lights, your lightning strikes or whatever effect that you might have in your lights. Render separately, and then this is gonna be 30 minutes instead of 60 minutes, and then having like 2 hours. Optimize by thinking that way, separating as much as possible, and it's gonna be better for you, and your deadline is gonna be thankful as well. So this pass, like I said, FX on top of it, just in normal. I didn't use any addition for this one because it's based, like I said, on the alpha. What I just did is have an opacity of 15. So if I go back here, I can change the opacity if I want, like have something very foggy. But let's leave it to 15 for now. I also asked him because I wanted the audience to focus on the house mostly, not on the background. I asked Tufik as well to add another pass of FX into the manor. So the same. I could have comped both here together, the fog, but I wanted to be separated because this one I changed the opacity, and at the end, as you can see here, I did some slight color correction. You can barely notice it, but it's basically a little bit desaturated and a little bit more bluish tint into this fog. I don't think you can see it properly here. And this is done for this shot. Actually, you might have end up having way more FX for your show depending on what work you're doing, but for this specifically shots, this is done for me. There is no much needs of adding stuff. I have my beauty, the correction of the windows. As I said earlier, you don't want to have too much correction because it's better. I know sometimes it's easier to correct in 2D, but try as much as possible to correct into your 3D, because you don't want to end up with because what you don't correct early in your post-production or pre-prod or whatever, you're gonna end up correcting it anyway at some point in 2D in the post-prod, and it's the same. You're gonna take time to correct it anyway, so do it in 3D first. It's gonna be better for you later. I have the splash on the ground, my rain, 2 rain. I have my fog, foreground, background. And that's it. That's all I wanted for this scene. And now become the funny part and the tricky part is the color correction, adding more effect in 2D and no 3D at all. There is no 3D element anymore that I'm gonna use except one, that is the trickiest one, is stealing the position of some element in my 3D and transfer them into After Effects 3D space. I'm not gonna do a complete tutorial on that because it's a little bit tricky, and maybe in another video, if you're interested, feel free to comment that below. The thing is, so for the sake of showing you, I'm just gonna disable everything. I hope it's clear for you guys. So what I did, as you can see, if I move forward the video, here, I'm having a light. This light is rendered in 3D, but I wanted to have special effect on this light, like a lens effect on the camera. I wanted to have like a glow around. You don't do this kind of stuff in 3D. I know there is a post-processing effect that is in 3ds Max, but nobody really uses that anymore because you can do the same nowadays. My light here, it's a light from After Effects because you can create lights in After Effects and relight some of your 3D. But it's based on the Omni position, as you can see here. You see? If I zoom in, because I really want you guys to see. Oh, let me do something better here. Let me lower the quality. It's following my lighting from start to finish. And in order to do that, I use a plugin called Max to HeyHey, so 3ds Max to After Effects. And it's basically, this plugin is super important for Max users because you can create omnis, export them into After Effects and have them into a 3D space. This is a 3D space. I can move, like if I show you, I can move my light here. If I click on my light, like I can move it. You can animate it. And you can also use it to create like planes and objects that After Effects is going to be able to use into your 3D space position. So it's very, very important plugin when you do compositing. It can help like creating effect and stuff. So if I go back here, I use an effect here. You see there is some glow and there is an effect on my camera as well. So if I go closer, can you see here? In order to do that, I use a plugin that is called Optical Flare. And this is an excellent plugin. If you're doing comp, 3D comp, or using After Effects, I think everyone must have it. It's one of the most popular light effects you can add on top of your 3D. You can add like a glow, iris, you can add like multiple iris, you can add a bunch of, and you just drag and drop them here. And this is the effect I used. You can control their intensity and stuff. And you can even see here, I hope you guys can see, but on top of my glow effect, I added like some dirt on my focal camera. Because I wanted the camera to be a bit dirty with fingerprints, fog, because it's raining, stuff like that. So let me display everything again. I'm gonna do that, it's gonna be easier. You can see here, like I have some artifact. It's from the lens of the camera. And on top of it, what I did, I don't know if you can see, I added some slow animation of a leaking into the lens, same of the camera. I wanted something that is moving, that is blurry, that is foggy, to add some more realistic effect into my composition. It's something discreet. You don't need to go crazy. You don't want to be too present, because then it's not gonna look good, as you can see here. And this is moving. This is something I purchased on Shutterstock, I believe. It's an animation that is very weird, but you put it like I said, it was like 15, 20, and it's enough. And it's gonna create movement and more detail into your 3D. So I had this, and now, only now, became the fun part of doing your color correction. And this is something I like to do. It's really fun, but like I said, it's part of the disclaimer I did at the beginning of the video. I'm not a comp artist. You need like eyes to see the color, the correction and stuff. What I'm doing here, it's a lazy comp. It's because a comp artist is gonna be way better to catch some stuff and to create like attention when your eyes want to see and to watch. Me, I'm just doing what I think is good looking, and because I'm curious and I always took pictures outside, so take pictures outside, film with your smartphone, see how things are moving, how the colors are interacting, how the sun is reacting to your phone and stuff like that. It's always important to be an observant, to observe stuff in real life, and to try to translate them into your 3D. And that's why I tend to do, and that's why I suggest you to do as well. But a real comp artist is gonna see this kind of stuff way better than I do. So that's why, like I said earlier, don't be offended. The comp I'm doing is not the best one ever, but that's worked for me and that's worked for this example. So what I use here is the fur color correction. Remember guys, I wanted something to be like at night, kind of horror looking, so I started to bring more blue colors, more red tint as well on the ground on some elements. And for this I use a cool plugin called Lux that is as well super famous. I unfortunately don't really use this kind of stuff anymore, but let me just do this kind of stuff. First thing I did is add a glow effect on everything, because it's night and I wanted to catch some glow here on my trunk. I started to put a warm color into the scene, because I found that always interesting, even if it's night, to add some warm into your color. I use some curve to exaggerate the dark area and make the light area more popping. I desaturated, because I always found that 3D tend to look too saturated. Always desaturate a little, but as you can see it's like 8%, which is nothing, but it's always bring more realism into your 3D. And at the end I use the 3 picking colors. I forgot the name of this, but it's basically adding more blue here and more purple for the dark shadow area and more blue for the overall pictures. And you can control everything, like add more green. It's super powerful. And if you want to move further, you can even base it on like alphas, on IDs and stuff, but I didn't do that for this example. So this is the first look pictures. On top of that, I did another curve because I noticed that actually it was still too bright, so I tried to compensate again. This is based, let me check here, for correcting the lightning strikes that I was having. So let's try to find one. Let me try to do that, maybe faster. Maybe here, I think we have, yeah, we have one here. So this one, you barely noticed it, but believe me, when you do an animation, people are gonna notice it. It's basically a small glow on more yellowish blue tint on the overall lightning strikes. and this one, there is an animation on the opacity, and every time a lightning strike was happening, it's animated and is adding 10% of effect. Let's go back here. I added another desaturation, and this one is only based on the green. Why is that? Because I noticed that when my lightning was striking, I hope you're gonna find one quickly. I think it's after. Yeah, here. You can see my green grass is a little bit too green, and it was popping too much, and it looked kind of fake. So I only desaturated the greens. And on top of that, I added a little bit of blue tint. Maybe it's nothing, I corrected some motion blur, as you can see. So because at the time my computer was not super powerful, my render is a bit noisy. If you looked really closely to my Tale from the Crypt short movies, you can see lots of stuff of noisy, moving, flickering, but I did what I could with what I had at the time. It's render on one computer, you have to remember that, so it was crazy. I believe it took like 15 days to render full time. My computer was rendering for 15 days. So there is noises. And to compensate those noises, I added with AfterEffects a motion blur, a little bit on top of it, and a noise removal. That's all what I did. So it's not perfect. I guess you can do better nowadays, especially with the computer and GPU stuff that you can have. But if you look here, like if I really want to show you, you can see here, I'm just kind of removing those sparkles, which is basically a lack of rendering quality. And at the end, what I did, which is a funny technique, is to add like a real lightning strike. See it? Yeah, here. It's basically a picture I found online. And this one, I did it here. And this one, there is a mask, but it's basically a mask based on the ID of the background. So I believe the lightning strike is at 234. Yeah, you can see it here. If I remove it, this is a totally 2D effect. And how I managed to do it, it's like I said before, using the Max to AE script. I used a plane position that I placed behind the manor. It's a plane, and I exported it as a FBX and imported it with the script, and AfterEffects was able to use the plane into the position of my 3D scene. It's really powerful when you want to do that. Then I just apply these textures of the lightning strike on my plane, and I was able to animate it. So there is an animation of the lightning strike as well. When it's 67 going, you can see here, like it's going to 0, and it's popping multiple times. I'm gonna show you a quick clip here, and this is how I did the lightning strike here. And at the end, what I did, I think you can see more at the beginning, because it's very hard to play with the DOF into your 3D. So I use a preset of DOF, depth of field, that was working for the entire overall scene. But sometimes you want to focus more on the foreground than the background. That's when AfterEffects and the compositing can come very handy. As you can see here, everything is a bit on the same page. So what I did, is I blur the house here. I don't know if you can tell. If I remove it, and I did. So now we focus more on the dragon here, the fence, and all of the foreground elements. So like I said, this is some sort of comp that I can do when I work from personal project or even for some client. Nowadays, I tend to not do comp anymore. It's very rare because some of the studio I'm working with, they have comp artists. I'm just giving them what they need, ID cache, render elements, could be like correcting some raw renders and stuff like that, and they do their magic. Something that is important, so if I want to do a recap of what we just discussed today, is always check your raw renders. You want to make sure that your beauty looks as close to the final comp as possible. There will always be mistake and correction, always. I don't know anyone that do like a raw render and is like, okay, done, approved. No, it's never happening. You want to work with renders element, so which is pass, fog pass, DOF, can be motion blur, because you can render the motion blur in the Vray element. You want to render the IDs, you want to render the lighting, light select, the shadows, your GI, everything, and you pre-comp all of this. And at the end, what you want to do is add your FX pass or your character. You can render everything together, which is way better, especially characters, render characters in the scene, but FX always separated. And like I said, it's based on your camera environment. You need to probably take your ground. If you want to do sand on the ground, you want to take or fog on the ground, you take everything that's gonna be important to hide and to mask, like your fence or whatever. Create another file on the side. It's gonna be lighter also to render and to transfer to the render farm. And this one is gonna be pure black. You don't need shaders, you don't need anything, so it's gonna be faster to render. Basic lighting. If you have lighting strike like I did here, you just take those light back. Some same camera, so you have the same motion blur, same depth of field, same movement of camera, which is really important. And then you start to add your fume effects, your rain, your particle flow, or everything that you render together, your Houdini effects or whatever you imported from it. And then only when you have compiled everything together, then only come the 2D fun part, which is the color correction, adding some lighting. You can add some like rain, you can add some stuff together. This is the funny part. I think that's it for today. I hope you liked this tutorial. I might do the next one based on the interior, because it's a similar process, but there is like difference in how to approach a comp between exterior and interior scene. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions regarding what I did today and what we discussed. I will be happy to help you resolve your issues. I know it's kind of old school, it's After Effects. Lots of people are gonna ask me if I can do probably tutorial on Nuke, but I don't use Nuke anymore, and Nuke is a little bit pricey for what I'm doing at home. So you might end up doing Nuke if you work in a studios, because this is the most common huge apps when you work in VFX. There is plenty of content of Nuke you can find online, I'm pretty sure. But feel free to ask any question, comment below, let me know if you're interested in seeing the interior. I can show you how I did it. And that's it for today. So see ya!